This is Viktoria Tocca. Today we are going to talk to you about press releases, how to write your own press release and what to do with it once you've written it. And of course, I have the most wonderful ladies with me. We have Mary-Jess and Joanna Forest.
Hi. Hello.
Welcome. So one of the things that you have to do if you're releasing music as an independent artist, or if you want to write a press release as a musical theatre performer or in any capacity, I think this will be really helpful because everyone doesn't have the money to actually get that help from a professional PR person. And we've all done our own press releases at one point or another. And I also know that you, Joanna, have a husband now, right? I'm so slow. Sorry, you have a husband.
I do.
Yes.
I do, my James.
Your James. And he's worked at The Sun newspaper.
That's right. So he is definitely somebody who knew about this kind of arena and has been very helpful to me with writing press releases. And I think it's the type of thing that you might think there's like a huge mystery to it. However, I've also had help when releasing music to have a PR professional help me and write the press release. But that's not always within everybody's budget. It's not always possible to have that work done for you. But you can write your own press release with lots of impact and hopefully lots of responses coming back to you, leading to lots of press opportunities and lots of exposure, because that's what your press release ultimately is. That's what the hope is for it.
And Mary-Jess, you've also written your own press releases. I know that all three of us have done so much work on our own with our music. So what's your experience on press releases?
Yeah, my experience with press releases is that you can use them for many different reasons, not just for when you're releasing music, but for live events or things in your life that you feel may resonate with other people. So, for example, the last press release that I wrote was about my time in Taiwan. So during COVID times, I was invited out by the Taiwanese government to perform events over in Taiwan where COVID was not an issue, to 100,000 people as a live audience. And it just gave me so much hope that during COVID times, this was possible and I could see the light at the end of the tunnel, even though the UK at the time was getting ready to go into another lockdown. So I decided to write a press release because I wanted to share that message of hope. So there are many different ways in which you can write one, but the main thing to do is to make sure that you get the story across of what you want to share in quite a quick and concise way. And the way I tend to write these press releases is I write them like an article. So if somebody is short on time, they can just copy and paste the whole thing, put it straight into the newspaper or magazine, and they've got a story. They haven't even had to do any work. So you're making somebody's life easy for them. Not only have you given them a story that you feel will hopefully resonate with their readers, but you've made it easy for them to create that story and put it into their publication because it's already there written for them.
And I think that's a really good point. It doesn't just have to be when you're releasing music. So you had a brilliant story there about singing in Taiwan, and it could be that you've won an award, or maybe you have done something a little bit different that you want to get press for. So there's no harm in when you've got something exciting to talk about that you write that press release and then you send it out to your contacts, which is something that we can talk a little bit about sort of creating your sort of database, as it were, of warm contacts where you know who is going to be receptive to you, who's printed articles or written articles for you in the past, who is the dream publication that you'd like to be featured in. And I think particularly when releasing music, I think it's a really good idea to research where would you like to be, where do you want this press release to appear in. And some publications have things that happen regularly. It could be like I've twice now for the Sunday Times and the Mail on Sunday been in a section that happens regularly, which is their money section, which is hilarious because what do I know about money? But my angle was independent artist. And they ask you all kinds of questions, but that's something that happens regularly. So if there's something that happens regularly, why don't you try and pitch yourself to get into that spot? Because, you know, there's tips and things that definitely that, you know, could be applicable to you that you can then get included with. And I think when you have something to shout about, never be afraid of just sending out your press release just everywhere, because how are people going to hear about it otherwise? And I think local paper is as a starting point, are a lot more receptive to local content. It's brilliant to adapt your press release to local girl, blah, 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 and they'll like that. But I think really what is more helpful in a way is to try and get into the nationals. Don't be afraid of sending your press release just everywhere, because you never know when they might have had a whole section on COVID and thought, oh wow, look at this soprano who sung in Taiwan. This is just excellent. Before you know it, you've got a double page spread because you sent off that press release far and wide.
Yeah, and I also think that one of the things that I've learned from a PR professional that I've used as, you know, help for sending out stuff when I've had the money, is that, again, send out your press release every time you're doing something that might be interesting for them to write about. You might not get printed every time, or, you know, it might not, but you will remind them that you exist and that you're creating things, that, and that, you know, you're doing things. And maybe, you know, like a couple of months down the line or whatever, they will remember, or you will send out another press release and like, oh, that's the girl who did this as well. I would also say, don't be afraid to like write down all the possible angles that you might have. For example, are you a mother? There are a bunch of like baby magazines or magazines for moms or children. Do you own a dog? You know, like, do you have a horse? Do you have a boat? Do you, like, there might be tons of things that you don't really think about, but like, oh, okay, so I have a dog that I rescued in New York, or I adopted her in New York. And suddenly, you know, a dog magazine will give you, you know, a bunch of space in their magazine to like show off your dog, but you're also talking about your music and who you are. So
100%. I've been on the front cover twice of Canine magazine purely because I have a dog. So you're absolutely right. And when I released Stars Are Rising, my debut album, the PR professional actually sent me it was like a list of what is different and interesting about you. And that really helped her think exactly what you were talking about. Is there some kind of niche publication that you can get in? And as a byproduct, yes, I love my dog, she's amazing, we go walking, by the way, I release music, this is what my albums are about, and yes, I love my dog. And it all ties in, and it all is raising your profile bit by bit so that people are used to hearing your name and seeing you here, there, and everywhere. So I think that's great. You know, dog mother, mother, you know, there might be something about speaking different languages, because Mary-Jess, you speak Chinese, which is amazing, Mandarin. There's like all sorts of different things, and you know, somebody's just bought a boat.
No, but you know, it could be like one of my favorite interests is cooking, or it could be like, oh, I sew all my own stage wear. Like, I don't, but I'm just saying, like,
somebody else does.
Haha, there you go. So I'm just saying, you know, and then obviously you have to decide where you draw the line of what is maybe too private, or what you, I've had questions from media about whether I want to talk about now being divorced.
And how do you feel about that? When you talked about the line, where is your line, would you say?
Well, I'm not really sure, because I feel like it really depends on what kind of magazine it is, or what, not even magazine, but what type of media. I have talked about it in a few podcasts, but those podcasts have really been for women in business. And in that respect, I feel like it's been important to me to talk about that it's possible to be a single mom, divorced, and run your business. You know, like you can talk about in a business perspective. I don't want to go into obviously the details of my divorce. If I can spin it to something that will be helpful or
inspiring to other women.
Yeah, to other women, for example, then I don't mind talking about it. Would you talk about your breast cancer? Would you talk about, well,
it's interesting you say that, because I always think, sometimes I've talked about it, and because my first album was in conjunction with a breast cancer charity, so it made sense to talk about it was in the press release. It made sense. I was trying to raise money for the charity, so it would always come up, and it was very helpful to the charity, and it felt like it was using my story in a useful way.
But you pick your moment, right? So it's not
because
like, I feel like
yes,
where I would draw the line, and I think you agree with me on that, is that you wouldn't go to the tabloids and like, oh, let me talk about my breast cancer, poor me, so that I can promote my music. If it comes up in, like a way where it would be helpful for someone else, or you know what I mean? Then, or it's breast cancer awareness month or something like that in a big women's magazine. So that's sort of the theme, or I don't know.
No, I totally agree.
You know what I mean? Like there are a bunch of things that where you might want to talk, or where it might be, okay to talk about certain things. Do you want to talk about mental health issues, if you have any? Do you want to talk about eating disorders? Do you want to talk about it's all up to you, like where you draw the line. And I think for me, it really depends on what type of media and why we're doing this. You know what I mean?
I definitely.
Yeah, I do know what you mean. I feel like for my press releases, whenever I've released them, I have tried to spin in a story that is inspiring in some way that I hope will help other people, because as creatives, sometimes it's difficult enough to talk about our work because it's such a personal thing. And so the idea of blowing our own trumpets feels really unnatural. So if you can feel better about it by trying to tell an inspiring story as part of the press release, then not only will you most likely feel more comfortable sharing your new music and your story, but it would be inspiring to other people. And newspapers and magazines, they have so much bad news. Give them something nice to print. They're always looking for it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think there's nothing wrong in having a talk with a journalist about sort of your boundaries, because I did, when I was promoting The Rhythm of Life, I did what I thought was going to be a lovely article with a very nice journalist. She asked me so much about the album and the inspiration behind it, and I really enjoyed the conversation. She also asked me about breast cancer. It turned into Woman, Breast Cancer 21. And when I read it, my heart fell, because I thought, I can't share this, because basically it's my breast cancer story. I haven't even really mentioned all of the lovely stuff we talked about, my music. This is just, could be about anybody who unfortunately has gone through that. It was a local thing, so I just thought, park it there, ignore it, learn from it. And then I had an interview, which was with the Daily Express, which was a much bigger deal. And I actually said to the journalist, I've just had this experience with the local paper, and I was really disappointed and disheartened. And I actually felt really sad about it, because I thought, out of everything we talked about, that's what you went with. And she really understood and she really got it. And she did mention it, but she tied it in a really positive way. It wasn't the focus of the article. It didn't define me as a person. And it was almost just part of my story that had led the building blocks to everything else that I'd done. And I thought that was really sort of human and nice of her. But it's very difficult to get copy approval when, you know, you're not Madonna. It's really difficult. They don't have the time to send it back to you or change little bits you're not happy with, which is why it's a great idea what you were saying earlier, Mary, just about have everything in the press release. Then hopefully they can just lift all the bits that you're happy with and sort of put it together if they're short in time.
I mean, I would say that when you write your press release, you will have to, I mean, you have to write it to fit the specific publication or radio station or whatever you're sending it to, whether it's, you know, local, focus on the local, if it's national or international. And there you can also decide, do I even want to put the breast cancer thing in there?
Exactly.
You know, if it's,
100%.
or like, I wouldn't write, you know, in my general press release, oh, I also have a dog, you know, like no one cares about your dog unless it's a dog magazine. Then they're going to be like, brilliant, we have, you know, an artist releasing music and she has a dog, you know what I mean?
That's a perfect example of why it's so important to write many versions of your press release. You've got a local one, you've got a world one, you've got an England one, you've got a dog one, you've got whatever other angle that you've got on it. Write multiple versions, just make sure that it's specific to where you're sending it, because if they see that you haven't done that research, they'll just discard it because they'll assume it's not right for them. Don't let them discard it on that first glance. It's got to be focused.
And talking about first glance, I was just thinking about some practical things about writing your actual press release. I think it's very important to have your logo, the actual artwork. And then it's almost like the very first line, which is your headline. Now that is your pitch. It is your opening statement. That headline has got to, because it has got to be eye-catching and interesting, because when they open that press release, they're looking at your opening statement and they're going to make a whole load of judgments on the back of that opening statement and your headline. So I think you really have to really think about what you want to say. So
it's got to be like a headline of a newspaper, hasn't it? You've got to think like a journalist. What's my eye-catching headline?
It is your splash, absolutely. I also think, just from a technical point of view, that if you're emailing, you can put in links to SoundCloud. You can make them private, but it just gives the journalist a chance to listen to some of them. And then to a radio station, you know, you might want to actually sort of attach some WAV files or MP3 files for them. I also put, and I don't know if you both do this, a track listing as well, just so they know what to expect from the album. And it's very important that you also put where they can find more information about you easily. If they want to suddenly phone you for an interview, is it easy for them to find out who, you know, how to do that? Put out when it's going to be released. That's really important. People seem to like, you know, knowing that released on this day. And also, is there anybody who's worked with you on the album that you can get some quotes from? That might be quite nice. When I did Rhythm of Life, I had Paul Potts as a duet partner, and he gave me, and Andy Day, a CBeebies presenter who sang with me, they gave me 2 little quotes, and they seemed to like that when they were when the press release got turned into articles. So I think that's a really good idea. And a bio.
Oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, and a bio. They might not bother finding out more about you, so why don't you do that? And also another technical thing, some images as well.
High resolution ones as well. High resolution images, because if they're rubbish resolution, they can't use them. Make sure they're high resolution images that you've got a link to, clearly labeled.
Perfect. That is exactly, yeah, more images, like click here type thing. Yeah, definitely. You could even put them in a Dropbox, but yeah, perfect. And then they've got everything that they need.
I have a spot on my website where you can go and download press pictures or, you know, press photos in printable size. So just make sure you have that link there. And I was also going to say that I also recommend writing your own quote. So
yes, I've done that as well. I was going to say that. Yeah, I mean, you know, it's a bit like I'm beyond excited to share the rhythm of life with the world, you know, that type of thing. But yeah,
because
of course,
they like to have a quote from you, and sometimes they don't. I mean, again, as Mary-Jess said very early on, write it in a way that they can just copy and paste and put it in there, because they are usually super short of time and they're lazy. So if you've done the work for them, they're like, oh, brilliant, this is done. Here's a quote, like from the singer herself, blah, 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 or from someone who is on the album, or whatever. But, you know, do that work for them, because very often they will just use it the way you've written it. And I've been featured, again, in so many like publications, on websites, on all kinds of things, blogs, I don't know what, just because they've just been able to take like literally the entire press release and put it on there. And that's why I also think, and we're going to get to that again, we've talked about it in earlier tutorials, but why it's so important to have good pictures as well.
Absolutely.
Because it's worth mentioning again that if you have really professional, good looking pictures that they can very easily download for either print or for web, they will very often use them. And I've ended up on covers of magazines and in newspapers and all kinds of things because I've had a good picture.
Yeah, it's very important to have a good picture. The other thing to mention as well that I put at the top of all of my press releases is I put for immediate release. So they know that this is very timely and to go out now. So if you were sending press releases out in advance, then you could label it as something else. But normally I do it at the time and say for immediate release. Something I wanted to ask you girls, actually, when you do a press release, in the past, I've always put, as part of the press release that I send out, Mary-Jess is available for further information or interview, and my email address and my telephone number. However, with my most recent press release, I sent it out. It was copied and pasted onto an online website. Thankfully, the person sent it to me to check before it went live, but they'd copied and pasted everything. And so if it had gone live without me checking, the whole world would have had my phone number. So I'm now thinking I won't include that in the press release itself. I'll put it in the email. But what do you girls feel about that?
No, I think that's probably a good idea, because I mean, sometimes they actually don't read through the thing. They're just like, oh, this looks good. They read the first couple of paragraphs or whatever. Okay, this is, you know, and they just post it. So make sure that if it's in the press release, which can be sent out as a PDF attachment to your mail, or just make sure that it's separate from the actual email if it goes out in mail form, which it usually does nowadays.
Yeah, normally it's an email with a Word document or a PDF attached. Right. And make sure as well that your links to things are really clear. You don't want to have great pictures at the top and the link to the pictures all the way down the bottom, because they might not see it there. They might come back to you and go, where's the pictures? And you go, it's in the link down the bottom, but it saves that communication. So if your links are really visible straight away, then that often helps out too.
Yeah, and I had a link like I've got here, a SoundCloud link, so that a journalist could listen to the album. And one of my local papers decided before the release just to put that link. And I was like, oh great, now anybody can just literally just click on the link. Then I had to change that SoundCloud link, and it was all just like, oh, because exactly what you were saying about your phone number, they just didn't think. So I can see a very cute dog. It's distracting.
Yeah, looking at you, so cute. Hello, puppy.
Aww.
What's your dog's name, Victoria?
Oh, damn it. Oh,
look, it's so cute. Look at her tail.
I thought you were talking to John. I'm like, what dog? Oh, my dog. Oh, she's hungry. That's why.
She's so cute.
Oh, do you want to come and say hi? Come down. Hello.
Oh, cutie puppy.
What type of dog is that?
It's a very unclear mix that I adopted in New York.
What's her name?
Marta.
Oh, Marta. Hello, Marta. Hello.
Okay.
Oh, give you a kiss, mummy, she says.
I'm like, what dog? And she's right there. Okay, that's funny. She's hungry, that's why.
The other thing I wanted to say about press releases is don't get disheartened. You might have to send your press release out to so many places. You might spend a day, you know, sending out to say 25 people, and then you get 2 replies. One of them is like, thank you very much, but we won't be including it. And then the other one is, yes, we're including it. And you thought, right, so that's one victory out of all of those, but it's worth it. Just keep going. Just don't get disheartened, because you never know when it's going to be picked up, and who's going to use it, and who's going to call you for an interview. And
yeah, and don't be afraid to sending them out, whether it's, you know, for you a really big press release because it's an album that you've worked on for a year or 2 years or whatever. You can send out a press release. I mean, I sent out a press release about me starting my YouTube channel because of COVID. Actually, Broadway World brought it up online.
Yeah.
So that was really cool. Yeah. But, you know, you never know.
Of something that's not actually an album as such, or a single, but an interesting story. And because you made a press release out of it, you got onto BroadwayWorld.com, which is fantastic.
Right. So sometimes, like, you don't have to think like, oh, this is not interesting for them to write about. I have a friend and colleague that was supposed to be in one of my shows. And because of COVID and everything shutting down, she is now studying to become a policeman or policewoman.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, and that has been like one of her dreams since she was little, but it was also a dream of hers to be a singer. And so she's been a singer for years and years. And now she's like, okay, so we don't know when the world is going to open up again. And now she's studying to become a policewoman. And I just saw today that she had a big article in, I think it was more of a local paper where she lives, but still like a 2-page spread of like the singing policewoman, you know? Yeah. And that's going to help her when the world opens up again and she can start singing, because if she then is going to do a concert or something, she can reach out to the same newspaper and say, oh, by the way, you did this article of me, you know, about the police thing, and now I'm actually able to sing again. Do you want to come and review my concert, or do you want to post something about my concert? So I think that even though you might think it's not worth writing about, it might actually be worth writing about for a paper. Or it sometimes, you know, they have space and they need something in there, you know, and it's like, oh, this is good enough. You never know.
Yeah, and I think we need to say why it's important that you do send out a press release, because there's so many reasons why it could be great. For example, the singing policewoman, she's now got a brilliant connection with that local newspaper. So when she does put on a concert, she can contact them, hopefully sell a few more tickets. Brilliant. But then also, Joanna, to follow on from what you said, even if one person picks it up after you spent days emailing people, that is so brilliant, because not only is that great social proof, and it shows that, you know, this newspaper wanted to feature you, it's great for the perception of you and your career, but also you never know who's going to see that. And I've got an example from my career of when I just got back from China. I just won the Chinese version of the X Factor, and my mum called our local newspaper and told them about what I did. I just thought, oh, brilliant, that'll be something nice to show the grandkids when I'm older. But that story in that local newspaper was then picked up by all of the national papers, because they keep an eye on all the local papers. You don't know who's looking. You don't know who's going to find that. You don't know where it's going to lead. So it meant that I was in the local newspaper on the Monday, and on Tuesday I was front page of The Guardian and in tons of other national papers with this story. That blew my mind. Like, it was the very start of everything for me, and I didn't know what was possible. But that completely blew my mind. You do not know who's looking. You do not know who's going to look at that article and go, do you know what? I've got this concert in China that I'm putting on. I've just seen this woman's won the X Factor there, let's hire her. Like, just as an example that's relevant to my career, but I'm sure there's loads of other ones. You don't know who's looking. Yeah, so and also it gives you the, sorry Joanna, also it gives you the opportunity to put that all over your social media accounts now that social media is so important, and it gives you that social proof where people can go, wow, she's been in the newspaper. It then makes it sound like you're somebody that they should pay attention to. Does that make, do you know what I mean by that?
Definitely. And I was just going to say, you're absolutely right. I think national journalists look at local papers for their stories. So that makes complete sense. You were in a local paper that your mum just thought, oh, this is a nice story. You know, my daughter's won the Chinese X Factor. But then the London Guardian, all those journalists are looking for inspiration for their stories. And then it ended up on the front cover. So I think it's very important to don't underestimate where your story ends up. You might think, oh no, this is just a little blog or something, but who's going to read that blog? Or yeah, you know, someone's asked me to do this and whatever, but then you don't know where it's going to lead. And also I think in this world, people Google you a lot. So it's quite nice to have articles. If someone's going, oh, who's Mary-Jess? This is Viktoria or whatever. And then they do a quick Google. How nice to just have bam, 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 bam. And all these articles that you've collected over the years. That looks like you're somebody because Google knows who you are.
Yeah. Joanna, I wanted to ask, would you mind holding up your press release just so that people can get a look of what a front page of a press release might?
Yeah, so we've got the album cover, and this is for my second album. So the headline was, official classical #1 crossover soprano Joanna Forest releases new album, The Rhythm of Life. Then we have a link to the album, a SoundCloud link, and then a little blurb about The Rhythm of Life. At that point, it had gone to #1 in the pre-orders, in the classical iTunes charts and the classical Amazon charts. And we talked about it being my follow-up album, a bit about the album because it was a concept album. Then we have the quotes from Paul Potts, Andy Day, Emma Kenny, who is a child psychologist. I don't know if you see her on This Morning talking about the power of healing music for children and stuff. My quote, Gary Andrews, who did the artwork and did the doodles for Inside. So every song had a piece of artwork to go with it. So Gary Andrews was my brilliant illustrator. And then a little bit about Robert Emery, who produced and orchestrated the album when it's released. And then the track listing, Dropbox for images, more information. And then, so that's on the second page. And then my bio, which is just about me, and also a link to my Facebook artist page as well. So this is 3 pages long when it's printed out, but I think when it's, you know, an attachment and part of a press release digitally, I think it's nice to have lots of information. And because just little nice things happened from this press release. Scala Radio was starting, and I got to be this, like, the soprano on Sky News to sort of talk about that. You know, they wanted, you know, a DJ from it, they wanted this, they wanted that. And so you just never know where it's going to, like what we were discussing, you just never know where it's going to end up. But you can guarantee it won't end up anywhere unless you don't take the time to send it out. And also, I think we talked about this, but make sure you have your list of warm contacts that you can go back to next time you have a press release. You know, try and methodically remember who you've reached out to. And in this day and age, if you do see something and you think, oh, wow, I really like that music magazine, and they, you know, they ask this soprano her 10 favorite classical tracks, and they seem to do that every week. Don't be afraid to write, I'm going to find her on Twitter, that's her details, right, this is her email, and then, like, constantly be looking for your own PR. And if you see somebody in a similar genre, maybe they've been on this podcast, maybe you could go on that podcast as well, maybe they're looking for more guests. It's like a constant thing, not only when you're releasing something specific or when you have a specific story. I think it's like a constant thing, isn't it, looking looking for PR opportunities.
Yeah, and like we've mentioned before, if you don't ask, the answer is always no. So ask the question. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about as well when it comes to press releases is that that also applies to TV and radio. And I feel like you shouldn't be afraid to follow up on your emails, either by emailing again if you haven't heard anything, or actually, making a phone call. Most of the time, you probably won't get hold of anyone, but sometimes you do. And they're like, oh, right, I read something about that a few days ago. Let me find it in the pile here. And like, oh, yeah, right. So can you do a radio interview tomorrow because someone actually got sick and can't do it? Like, there's nothing wrong with asking a question or asking again.
Yeah, exactly. And it's quite a lot of the time people might have read it, gone, that's brilliant, and something's distracted them. But this might sound like quite a lot to keep on top of, but actually it's quite easy once you're organised. So the way that I stay on top of things like this and stay organised is I've got a spreadsheet of all of my warm contacts, and I've got different columns as well. So there's some columns on there where the newspaper isn't printing anymore, and so I've got not printed anymore, because otherwise you can Google for new contacts and it will come up, but you're wasting time emailing them because you don't have it written down somewhere that actually they're not in print anymore. You've got all your warm contact emails, and then you've got columns where which press release was it that you sent out? Was it your dog focused one? Was it your local focused one? Did you get a reply? Yes, what or no? What was the reply? And then if you didn't get a reply, you can mark it as no or in red if colour's your thing, that helps. And then you know to contact them again. But then it's not all stored up in your head and it's not all this big massive thing. It's clearly organised in a spreadsheet. You can see exactly who you've emailed, what the response was, do you need to email them again? And then it becomes a much more manageable thing, because then you've got like a checklist that you can tick off, where you can go, have I contacted this person? Yes. Have I contacted this person? No, I'll do that now. And then it's not this big massive task. It is something that is clearly organized so that you can pick away at it and just get the press release out to as many people as you can. So that's how I keep on top of things. I've got the spreadsheet with all of the names of the publications, the email addresses, the names of the people I contact, and then I know exactly what's going on with each publication. But the other important thing to say about that is the names. If you can get people's names and address the email to them directly, Joanna, I know you're writing for Canine magazine, or whatever it is, Victoria, Classical Crossover magazine. If you've got somebody's name and it goes to them directly, they're far more likely to pay attention to it instead of a "Dear Sir, Madam" title at the top. So if you can get somebody's name, it takes a bit of extra time and research, but once you've got it, it's so important to keep referencing them by name and addressing things by name, because then they're far more likely to pay attention to it.
Yeah. And it's the same for radio people. Like if you do go to a radio station and you do an interview there, write down the name of the person that actually did the interview. It might not be the same person who called you in for the interview, but because they have a lot of different jobs at a radio station. And but if, say, oh, Anna is the morning show host, but Roger was the one who booked you for the interview, the next time you're releasing something or want to talk about something, you can, go directly to Anna and like, oh, remember when we did this? And hopefully they thought it was a fun and good interview or whatever. And they will gladly have you on again because you were a fun guest. One of the things that I usually do when I send out a press release regarding radio or TV, but radio, is that I will write that I will happily perform live in the studio. Because a lot of the singers and artists going out for interviews and press like that, they are not as good as you think when it comes to singing live. So most of them don't want to do it. I have no problem singing live and I enjoy doing it. So I just tell them that, oh, if you want me to come and do an interview, I can also sing this song live on radio. And usually that's what tips the scale for me. A lot of times they'll be like, brilliant, we have someone who's going to sing for us. Yay. And I've gotten so many interviews on radio stations, local and national and even international ones. because I've been willing to sing live on radio. I mean, I'm not saying that everyone is willing to do that, but if you are and you can do it well, that might be something that will help you to get that interview.
That's a really good piece of advice, especially maybe around Christmas. You're like, I'll come in and sing some Christmas carols. You know, not everybody might do that.
Yeah, or a song from your album, or, you know, like we've done a lot of press for the touring show that I produce from Broadway to Duvemåla. And it's like, yeah, we, you know, because we're 5 singers and someone can usually always go and do an interview and sing something live, because that's what we do. So, if I can't go, then maybe Lila can go, or, you know, one of the boys can go, or whatever, you know, and sing something. And that way we get a lot of interest for our show as well. So if you're able to perform live well, then why not, you know, let them know that you're willing to do that.
That's a really good point for a show as well, because a lot of the time, unless it does what it says on the tin and people know exactly what it is on the title, it's really difficult for them to part with their hard-earned cash when they're not entirely sure what it is that you're offering. So if your media release that you're sending out, and I say media release because then it encompasses radio as well as press and other things. If the media release that you're sending out says more than willing to perform live and it's for a concert, that's the most brilliant thing to do, because then people know exactly what they're going to get when they buy a ticket. So they're far more likely to part with their money, which is difficult to get people to do for live shows, because they know what they're going to get. So that's brilliant. So we can easily see how important it is to get press releases out. As we said earlier, it's so difficult for performers to blow their own trumpets, as it were, but there's so many reasons why you can do that and do it in a way that's helpful and inspiring to other people, and that helps your career in so many different ways. Like as Joanna said with Google, when you've got lots of articles coming up, the social proof it gives is amazing. So there are so many reasons to get a press release out there. So if you've got a story, you've got an angle, you've got something you want to say, write that press release, don't delay with it, get it out to people, start creating your warm contact spreadsheet so that you can be fully organized, and just start spreading your message, because you never know who's going to read it and who it's going to resonate with.
Well, I think that's it for this tutorial. We've talked about a lot of brilliant things. If you have any questions, write it in the comments below. We will answer all the questions down there. And otherwise, I just want to wish you all great luck with your press releases, and hope that you subscribe, that you like and comment on this video. And we'll be back with more excellent information that will help your career. So thank you, ladies, Joanna Forest and Mary-Jess.
Thank you.